James Broughton. Yes, I can. I can tell you exactly how I met James. It was over at Galen and Greg's house, and I was invited over for this dinner and to hear a poetry reading from somebody I'd never heard of. And this couple had come to town, James and Joel, from California, exotic faraway land, and we had a lovely meal, and then after the meal we had a poetry reading. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I've never really been to a poetry reading before. I'm becoming erudite. And then the poems were just like obtuse and unusual, and I'd never heard anything quite like them before. And I thought, this is not what I expected. This is frivolous. What am I doing here? I challenged myself. At any rate, that was my first take on James. I was like, who is this guy? And this Joel, I liked them, but I didn't get it. I really didn't get it to start with. It took me years, actually, to really embrace and take in James's poetry. I guess the depth behind the frivolousness. James had this ability to be very on the surface and light and fun, and I just dismissed that as kind of shallow, when in fact, over the years, I came to realize that there's other layers if I'm willing to peel the onion away. And James taught me a little bit about how to look at something and take it for what it is, and then look again, go a little deeper. And so I feel like I had the opportunity to learn about my own process through what he was offering. So it took me a few years, actually. I was a little slow student. Well, that was before they came to town. And after they moved to town and bought a place out by North Beach, I got to know them through having dinners occasionally, gatherings with friends, the famous 8448 birthday party out at Carol and Jan's place. There was opportunities for us to get together here, and so I kind of over time got to know them a little bit more fully. And it richened and deepened over time for sure. At least I richened and deepened over time. Yeah. James did share his creative process. He never made it look easy. He let us know, he let me know that it was a struggle sometimes, writing. He would get up in the middle of the night. He had a writing desk near his bed, and sometimes when he didn't sleep well, he would get up and write. So I guess what I got was that, this is not a piece of cake, writing poetry. This is actually a struggle. And that he was willing to apply himself to that struggle is what made me realize his depth. Many memorable experiences I had with him. Absolutely. I feel very fortunate. My goodness, where to start? Many lovely dinners around the table, typically with Joel cooking, friends around, beautiful conversation. Absolutely many memorable times. Also, hearing him read poetry at the 1004 Gallery here uptown, Port Townsend. Him taking his walk downtown that he did every day, ending up at Elevated Ice Cream at the same time every day to have his cup of tea. And, people would stop in and chat with him. It was kind of like holding court a little bit, but in a very gentle, unassuming sort of way. Lovely, amazing journeys together, just in spirit. Times when we would really connect in a really deep and meaningful way and have ritual or have ceremony. And then some challenging, difficult times as well. I remember James and Joel had a hot tub, and we would often come over and have dinner and then go for a soak in the hot tub. Lovely pavilion overhead made by Greg Mitchell, and the stars above. And one time, I remember just as James was getting old and frail in later years, and just as we're lowering him into the water, the touch of the water on his body was dramatic enough, and he had a moment, a seizure. We weren't sure what was going on, but his body stiffened, his eyes rolled back. We thought, oh my goodness, we're losing him. And it was very scary and dramatic. And then after a while he came to, and we didn't take a hot tub that night. But that was very dramatic, that experience. It was a near-death experience. And this was a few years before he actually passed away. It was a little bit freaky. I suppose, yes, there were things about James that irritated me. But I suspect there were more things about me that irritated him. I kind of feel like he tolerated me at some level. How shall I say? Yeah, how to describe this? Early on, I think what irritated me about James was his frivolousness, his levity. And I'm kind of a serious person, and I want to know how things are and what's happening and what's going on. And he's all about, other stuff, balloons floating off in the ether or leaping your abyss. And at the time, I was more about upholstering my rut. So we had a challenge at the beginning. And it was only after years had gone by where I think we actually got to really appreciate each other more fully and give each other some room to be who we are. And now, in retrospect, I really appreciate that he challenges me to follow my bliss and not get stuck in my own upholstered rut. How James approached death. I heard James talking about death often. For somebody in their late 70s and then early 80s, he wasn't afraid to talk about death. He wasn't afraid to be thoughtful and mindful and communicative about his own experience of his own demise. He would often talk about what he called his creeping decrepitude, which was slowly consuming him and taking him over. And for him to be talkative about that as a relatively young person, it was powerful for me to hear somebody who's looking at the other end of life and to be welcoming it as a friend. So, on that note, let me read a poem of James. This one is called Thinking About Death. How often do you think about death? Death thinks about you all the time. Death is fatally in love with you and me, and his lust is known to be relentless. Life is an equally persistent lover. He was desiring each of us before we were born. I try to remain faithful to him, but I know the relationship can't go on forever. Life relishes my body heat, my heart beating, my blood, my semen, even my steamy notions. Death cherishes what is cool and mysterious in me, all that is shadowy and perverse like him. I like to think of death awaiting our rendezvous in a candlelit corner of an intimate cafe, where he will regale me with scandalous tales of misbehavior in other worlds. Yet in the end, it is life that wears us out. At that crosswalk, what will the traffic bear? Shouldn't we think about death more often? Death is thinking about us all the time. Yeah, after James's passing, we had a really poignant time just gathering around him. And my recollection is that the house was filled with light. Both the natural light of the day, and then as evening drew close, the candles. Lots of candles. 100 candles. And yeah, his spirit was hovering. And then some people started coming by to spend time with James's body. And yeah, lots of emotion, lots of sharing, lots of beauty. First just a few, and then quite a few people came over the next day or so while he was lying in state. And yeah, there was just a sense of holding, gathering. It was a beautiful time. And then there were some shenanigans, of course, because it was James. I do remember talking with the folks at the funeral home about how we were going to get his body from the home to the funeral home. And I have an old produce truck, and I guess you have to pay a lot of money to have them come with the hearse and the whole 9 yards. And so I volunteered to drive him there in my truck. And so being as he was going to be cremated, we had one of the coffins for cremation delivered, or I went and got it actually, and we put him in it. But then getting him down the stairs was quite a fiasco, because it was the living floor, or living area of the house was on the second floor. And so there was either the outdoor stairs or the indoor stairs, and the indoor stairs had this big U in them, so it wasn't convenient to get a long box down through there. So we took him down the outdoor set of stairs and just about lost him on the way. We had a couple of friends come over, and moving bodies that are supple and lithe is one thing, but moving bodies that are not is something else entirely. And it was quite a fiasco, quite an experience. After he was cremated, and we brought his ashes back to the house, and there's this beautiful urn that the artist Anne Hirondell had made to receive his ashes. And as the ashes are being placed in the urn, this most amazing and magical thing happened. There was this like little eruption of ashes going up into the ether. It was like a little explosion of joy. Yeah, I have to call it an eruption that happened, where the ashes were actually starting to scatter themselves already. It was quite an amazing moment. Almost an ejaculation, yes. I think my favorite memory of James was outside the kitchen on the second floor. Between the kitchen and dining room, there was a little small deck. And there was a chaise lounge there and a chair. And James would sit out there and sun himself sometimes. And I remember sitting out there with him one time on a sunny afternoon and just talking. And I remember him sharing what felt like little tidbits and insights, and I was asking questions, and he was kind of offering himself to me as an elder, and I was young and wanting to soak it all up and take it in, and it just felt like I don't know what, Dharma transmission or something, that he was offering me something. That's one of my favorite memories of James. I think James's main message to Malcolm was, lighten up, dude. Yeah. Follow your own weird. Don't even try to fit the mold. It doesn't fit you. Yeah. Have some fun. I think he was telling me. And I tend to be serious, so that was important for me to hear. James's role in Port Townsend was he wasn't like in the forefront so much, the limelight. He was in the shadows a little bit, and yet he carried such a strength and power with him that people noticed him. When he would go on his morning walk down to Elevated Ice Cream and have his cup of tea, people noticed him because he's sitting there and he's writing. Who is this guy? What's going on? And they were drawn to him. And so even though he wasn't forceful in how he put himself out there in the community, I think he carried a quiet power with himself that people recognized and wanted to connect with or listen to or participate in. I do know that he also took a morning constitutional out to the Cook Avenue Overlook, which was close by James and Joel's house. And it was about half a mile walk, and right on a bluff overlooking the ocean, overlooking the sound. And it was just a meditative time for him to have some quiet space to himself. And I think he really enjoyed that. And I do know that people along the way watched for him every day. I think James loved Port Townsend for the quiet and the depth, and that there are so many amazing, kooky people hidden in the woodwork around here that you would never guess, but are there and just lend a character to this place that's really quite exceptional. I think that he connected with that and certainly contributed to that in a major way during his 10 plus years here. Yeah. Well, Port Townsend is a shifting and changing place, but when James and Joel moved here, it was a burgeoning, flourishing artist community, a growing, I would say, fairly cosmopolitan small town. You know, for a town of 8,000, there's lots going on here. We have good arts, music, theater. For a tiny little town like this, there's an amazing amount going on. And I think James really appreciated being a part of the whole arts scene here. You would see him at gallery openings, you would see him at poetry readings. Joel had his own art openings, James had his own poetry readings as well, but he very much participated in the life and the culture of the community here. And Port Townsend, you know, is a maritime community with fishermen and boat builders. It's a pretty lovely place, but it's also rather chilly here. We're a maritime community, and the wind blows here all the time, and summers are cool. So it's a counterpoint to California for sure. But I think James appreciated the quieter nature of Port Townsend as opposed to the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. And he did speak about his writing changing as he moved to Port Townsend. I feel about James kind of like the odd uncle that I never had. He gave me permission, I guess, to just be more fully myself, to seek and follow my own weird, to listen to that muse, to that amazing dream, and find a way to make it so. James, gave me permission, helped me to inquire and discover in myself the poet. James Broughton was a light in my life. James Broughton was very opinionated about what he wanted to eat. James Broughton worked very hard at his craft. James Broughton lived a very full, rich life. James Broughton tickled my fancies. James Broughton loved Joel very much. James Broughton loved men. James Broughton loved sunshine and flowers and springtime. James Broughton loved the spoken word. This is it. And I am it. And you are it. And so is that. And he is it. And she is it. And it is it. And that is that. Oh, it is this, and it is thus, and it is them, and it is us. And it is now, and here it is. And here we are. So, this is it. You ready?
Stumbling. That's for James.
There you go.
Not brave.